On the Africa, grown North Sea, biting never bites. Fast water swimming in the girls down with the guys. Fit now see, bite you right by. OMG, Mac 4, Robin C, Gallon Neck Night. Hot stove talk, Robin C, bringing the hype. EC's alive, plus toss some of those in my city life. White Queens got the dreams united. On the rag, try rap, bring me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park, fuck a deafening. Game time, Robin C, game time, with the night. Under NYC.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Hot Stove Live, episode 2 on both of our channels and on X. Hopefully, all of our Mets fans are enjoying themselves and enjoying their Sunday as we get to talk more about the New York Mets and the possibilities and the endless possibilities of the Mets offseason. And hopefully, it's a very successful offseason. And we'll talk all about it. The topics will be on the side right over here. I also put down on the bottom Mets payroll, pre-arb, post-arb, and how much tax space is available before they really get into the tax penalties with their salary, with the overall salary. So we're going to get into that as well. But before we get into any of that, let's say hello to the man, Chris. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Appreciate everyone being here. Episode 2 of the Mets Hot Stove Live. We got you all off season long. Obviously, we've seen a plethora of topics this weekend. One is, right, the major topic in Mets land regarding Sean Manaea. We'll talk about that as well. Obviously, free agency begins tomorrow. Hopefully, last year free agency, we all know how that went in terms of dragging itself out. Hopefully it's a little bit quicker this time around, although I won't get my hopes up. We obviously know that there's a lot of players that are going to be waiting in terms of signing deals and waiting for other players maybe to sign deals first to sort of set the market. It's kind of annoying. It's a long haul in terms of how we have to sort of sit around and wait and speculate and listen to all the garbage rumors going around from people that, think they have sources and are tricking everybody else. You know how it goes. But anyways, we got you all covered with the latest and greatest news. Appreciate you all being here. Make sure you hit those thumbs up buttons on both of our streams. These are obviously, being streamed to both of our channels. Pop into both chats, vote in both live polls, and we're here to chop it up with you all. So make your opinions heard and known. Let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel like it's going to be a pretty active off season with signings and trades. I think that Major League Baseball, and I think it was very well discussed throughout baseball, the teams were complaining, the players were complaining, the reporters were complaining, and nothing was really happening for a while. Everything was spaced out way too much. And it ended up being a boring offseason, unless your team did something the Dodgers were basically the one team that did basically everything. And that's basically what happened. So it was a lot of basicallys in there, but that's basically how basic it was last offseason. And it was just Dodgers and everybody else. I think it's going to be very, very active. I think a lot of teams realize that it's what you can do in the offseason can put you in an excellent spot when it comes to the trade deadline, right? There's too many questions, I believe, with a lot of teams, including the Mets. Last year, there was so many question marks with the Mets offseason, even though there was plans that could have went either way, but there was still a ton of questions with the Mets and many other teams where it seemed like a lot of teams didn't do enough. And going into the season and then getting into towards the trade deadline, there was still questions. I'd rather have a more, I would say, put together team, which I think a lot of us believe that the Mets are going to do. Steve Cohen and David Stearns is going to do. I like to have almost a complete team going into the season where you have to fill in a little bit of the blanks or the problems around your team that you lead into the trade deadline instead of needing the big pieces, because that's when you can really, bleed out your farm system and have to give up way too much. I'd rather have the team ready to go when the season starts, and then, fill in a little bit as needed at the trade deadline. But it starts with the Mets doing what they need to do this offseason. And it starts tomorrow at 5 p.m. as free agency begins 5 days after the World Series is over. Thank you, Yankees, for losing very quickly. And now at 5 p.m. tomorrow, it is rumor mill central as you find all the fake accounts, and as Chris said, and all the bad rumors, and might be real, might be not, and you're going to see that a lot. So don't take everything for granted, but it's officially free agency season Monday at 5 p.m. And Chris, I want to get your thoughts. Like, do you think we're going to see a couple of quick deals? Because you're already seen, players that were already, or at least one in Michael Wacha, who had exclusive rights to talk to a team, to their former team, and sign. Right, that period is going to be over at 5 p.m. tomorrow, and Michael Wacha goes back to the Royals, if I'm not mistaken. Right, I think it was the Royals. So it's a start. Do you think you're going to see a couple of those sign-ins for maybe one of the Mets, or you're going to see a lot in baseball before they become actual free agents at 5 p.m. tomorrow?
Yeah. So it was Michael Wacha, he was on the Royals, right? So it was basically kind of an extension type of deal with them.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Yeah. He wasn't technically an unrestricted free agent. Yeah.
Right. And so I think that, and the Mets have free reign to do this with some of their guys, if I'm not mistaken, right? So they have free reign, but the problem is that, the guys that everyone wants to talk about, and we'll talk about the main guy here next of this topic, the show for the Mets is Sean Manaea, right? I think we're mostly going to see that, to answer your question, for the relievers. And we saw a couple of relievers already been re-signed, right? The Braves signed a couple of their relievers to some multi-year deals. I believe Brent Suter as well for the Reds re-signed with the Reds as well. I think that the early deals, and we talked about this last show, right? What you're going to get in terms of the bullpen and the reliever market. There's a lot of guys that are out there that are going to sign for those 1-year deals, because let's face it, you're not giving out long-term contracts to many relievers on the market, especially not this market, maybe outside of a Tanner Scott, maybe outside of an AJ Minter. Someone might give Aroldis Chapman a multi-year deal as well. That's another lefty that's on the market. But all in all, when you take a look at the encompassing reliever market, those are going to be comprised of all 1-year deals, maybe 2 with the club option for the second year, but that's about it. So I think that it's going to get off to a very slow start. I'm not sure exactly what the news around the league is in terms of multiple teams checking in on XYZ player. Obviously, we know about, Juan Soto and the Mets, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But in terms of the rest of the bats, I haven't heard much of the rumor mill in terms of who's checking in on who. But, I would think that the starting pitching and the bats, it would take a little bit to get going. But I wouldn't be shocked if we see a couple of teams just off rip, just go ahead and sign some relievers to try to bolster their bullpen. So I think that if we see the market get off and free agency get off to a hot start tomorrow, it's going to be in that reliever market for those 1-year deals. Maybe those vet guys, Ryan Stanek, I could see potentially either re-signing with the Mets, right, or going elsewhere on a 1-year deal. So, relievers of that nature, I would say.
Yeah, and I think Michael Wacha, he re-signed for like a 3-4 year deal with the Royals. So, that's why I brought it up in regards to, obviously relating to the Mets. And obviously our second topic of the day is about one of our own in Sean Manaea. Is it possible that Sean Manaea, he did talk about, obviously we knew he was going to opt out regardless how much he loved being a Met and everything like that. But I do wonder, are the Mets negotiating with him or Severino and a possible couple of other relievers that are officially going to be free agents as well? I do wonder if David Stearns, he loves doing this. He did it a lot with the Brewers, where he would keep guys that were potential free agents, and it would come to like a gentleman's agreement when it came to a contract where it's team friendly, but the player is also satisfied with the number. And again, Sean Manaea, what was he getting? About $14 to $15 million if he didn't opt out or something like that. So I think he's looking closer to 20, maybe a little bit more. And that leads us right into the show Manaea, right? There's a little bit of I wouldn't say rumors, but a little bit of I guess reports that he's looking for that 4-year deal worth around 20 AAV per year. Well, Chris, that's tough because depending on what the Mets really are doing here, is the lower, I guess, the middle tier pitchers, and Sean Manaea, he might have been the ace for the Mets, but he's in that middle tier, that second tier of pitchers, starting pitchers on the market. We know the big boys. We see him in the topics below. Burns, Snell, and Fried are the big boys, right? Do those guys wait, like the Severinos, like the Manaeas, the guys that are in that tier, wait until the big boys sign so they can have like a benchmark to talk about with other teams, saying, well, I'm that next level. I want to, Burns, Snell, and Fury get about 27 to $30 million. You're going to damn sure think that the middle tier guys are going to get between 20 and $23 million. Like we talked, look what happened last year, right? Severino, who had a terrible season, got $13 million from the Mets. And it just seems like starting pitching is still a premium. And it's going to cost you to bring in starting pitching, even if it's at that second tier like Manaea will be. Would you give Sean Manaea a 4-year deal around that $20 million mark per year? Or will you have to think about maybe he would take a little bit less year, one less year? And I don't think it's really the AAV, Chris. What do you think?
I don't know, man. So the thing is that we have to take a look at the quality lefties on the market, which there are very few of. Really, right? There's not really many quality starters in this market. Let's be real. It's kind of sparse. So you take a look at the guys that you mentioned in terms of Corbin Burns, a guy like Walker Buehler, who's in my live chat poll right now. So make sure you guys are voting in terms of, if Corbin Burns is not available and the Mets don't get him, who would you go after, immediately after that as a plan B? But I take a look at the lefties on the market. You got Max Fried, you got Blake Snell now, which was, announced him opting out of that deal, which was worth around $38.5 million, right? I believe for the 2025 season with the Giants, and he opted out. So he obviously wants a long-term contract, and we'll talk about him here in just a second. But, outside of those two guys, then you have your Sean Manaea, right? And then you have, when we talk about the tiers, then you have Yusei Kikuchi, right? And those are really the only valid lefties, in my mind, in free agency in terms of as far as starters go. So this could create a scenario, right? Maybe not with the bigger name teams, but I mean, the Mets are going to be in the mix. Obviously, they're a big name team, but right, let's talk about the Dodgers, and there's multiple reports of them wanting to retain a California guy. So there's, Max Fried, maybe. I'm making up hypotheticals, obviously, because obviously free agency starts tomorrow. But then you talk about, a guy like Blake Snell. There's a whole conversation if the Mets want to go after Blake Snell, but let's say he lands elsewhere, as well. These mid-tier teams that maybe can't afford a Max Fried or they can't afford a Blake Snell will kind of dip a little bit into the bucket of going after Sean Manaea, which can create a little bit of a bidding war. And I really do think the deciding factor here is David Stearns seems like a very level-headed guy, right? No matter what type of money he's working with in terms of what Steve Cohen gives him, he can go out there and say, hey, listen, I'm giving you $120 plus million. You spend it accordingly. And we all think that, this might be a situation where he kind of goes above and beyond to retain his guy, right? And Sean Manaea, that performed exceptionally well in 2024. But the type of president of baseball operations that he's been proven to be, right, and GM that he's proven to be over the course of his career so far, he's not going to overpay no matter who it is. Their value in his mind is what their value is. And that's why I created my poll in the community tab of my YouTube channel, asking you all as the viewers, right, as Mets fans, How much money for Sean Manaea is too much in your mind? David Stearns is going to have a figure. And if he's going to be competing with these other teams out there, he's going to have a cap. And then he's going to go elsewhere, right? Because the Mets are still in the market for some of these other bigger names, right? I don't think Sean Manaea, with as good of a season as he's had, he's not in the same playing field as Blake Snell. He's not in the same playing field as Max Fried. Those guys are going to get premier top dollars, and the Mets presumably will be in on those guys as well. But in terms of retaining Sean Manaea's services, how much is too much? I really do think, Rob, and I hear you at the end of the day, he definitely enjoyed being a Met. He enjoyed being in New York. We know that because our guy, Hector from Washington Heights, met him in person, and he was kind of, tossing a baseball around with Sean Manaea. How crazy is that? And Sean Manaea told him and all those guys that were, at, I believe, Central Park that day, he loves being in New York, and he's still getting acclimated to the environment. So yes, there is a little bit of, he could take a team-friendlier deal, maybe shave a year off the contract. But at the end of the day, this league, right, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, whatever, it's a business. And there is a team out there, right, that is going to give and extend an offer to Sean Manaea for 4 years worth $20+ million. I firmly believe that. And it's up to David Stearns in this front office to determine and predetermine what Sean Manaea's value is. The value is different to everybody, and it's obviously subjective. But that's what I encourage in terms of thinking through this logically and objectively, and just not thinking, okay, well, this guy's going to take a team-friendly deal because he loves being a Met, or let's toss 25, 26, 27, 28 million dollars for the sake of retaining him because he was a great Met in 2024. There is a sweet spot that David Stearns has proven he's capable of and will hit for any free agent that's out there. So that's kind of my line of thinking. Yes, Rob, you are right. You know what? You might throw 22, 23, 24 million at him, and he might take 3 years instead of 4. Am I confident in banking on that? No. And I don't think David Stearns should be either. I really do think that the predetermined market value for Sean Manaea is 4 years. And I think it'll be very hard to get him off that and get, the agent off of those 4 years.
Yeah, I think you have to be smart about this, right? We always talk about who is our ace, and Sean Manaea was our ace, but why was he our ace, right? Yes, he pitched extremely well, but there was no Senga the entire year. Luis Severino, who everybody thought would be the ace because of his stuff, basically, took a back seat to Sean Manaea a little bit. And the Mets didn't have a Corbin Burns, didn't have a Max Fried, a Blake Snell, or any other top ace in baseball. They didn't have that. So Sean Manaea, pitched extremely well, but you also have to be realistic as well and realize, is he worth that extra 4th year, right? And usually lefties, they kind of, sometimes they actually get, they figure things out and get better with age. And when it comes to lefties, so you might trust the lefty a little bit more. But I think that if David Stearns is realistic and most Met fans are realistic, Manaea is probably a number 3, probably best number 2, right? That's where he should be. Right? If you're willing to give him that 3 years, maybe he would say, all right, listen, let's get a mutual option on the 4th year. But again, this is a business. If somebody offers a guaranteed 4th year for similar money, he's probably going to go there. And, that's not the end of the world for the New York Mets here, right? You brought up Walker Buehler not too long ago. That's an option that you could probably get him on a 1-year deal because he's still in that prove it type of mode. He came back late in the season with the Dodgers, looked a lot better in the postseason. But the 2nd year after the Tommy John is really where you see the guy take the next step. And David Stearns is meticulous in his thought process with that, as he did with Severino, as he did with Manaea. And I think Walker Buehler is, I didn't think Walker Buehler would be an option for the New York Mets when the season was still going on, when a lot of people were talking about it. But now I think it is, because I don't think you need to give 3-4 year deals to a number 3 starter, a number 4 starter, a number 5 starter. I think you got to fill those up with 1-year deals if you don't have spots for those. And right now, David Peterson and Kodai Senga are your starting pitchers in this rotation. I do think David Stearns will go above and beyond, even though he will have a number in his head for one of those bigger guys that we see in the topics list. I don't think he's going to do that for a guy like Manaea or Severino. I think he's going to be firm with Severino and Manaea on a 3-year deal. I don't think he's going to go beyond that, because you got to see those guys as a number 3, occasionally a number 2 at best. And you don't give those guys multi-year deals often when they're not big time starters like a 1 or a number 2. And I do think there's a big possibility that you won't see Manaea or Severino in a Mets uniform in 2025, because there's other guys out there that are just as good, if not better, that you might get on a 1-year deal, like a Walker Buehler, or say a Kikuchi as your number 3 or number 4, something like that, where I think people can be looking at as well. And who knows, with trades as well, that, we didn't see the Adrian Hauser trade coming, even though that didn't work out for us. That can be a trade. For the last couple of seasons, the Mets have made trades. They made the Chris Bassett trade in 2022. So the Mets seem to always make that trade for a pitcher during the offseason. And that's something that you really have to take into perspective as well. Because if they can find a guy like a Manaea or like a Severino, or even a solid number 2 in a trade, well, that kind of solves one of your issues already. And why give a 3-4 year deal to a guy that's probably at best a number 2 on his best day, and probably a number 3, Chris?
So if you don't mind, if we segue this Manaea topic and into the Burns Snell Fried topic, and then talk about Soto afterward, because I think that what we're starting to see here with the way this rotation is set up, 100% agree with you that a trade for maybe one of those mid-level guys that you just mentioned, can you still hear me? I'm not sure if you can.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
There we go. No, you're good. No worries. I lost my train of thought. Okay, so a trade for one of those mid-level guys is certainly feasible, right? Or you could also trade for a quote-unquote co-ace. Now, that's a little bit less likely because you got a couple of guys on the market, but in kind of trying to see through with the way they're going to build out this rotation, given the fact that you only have Senga and Peterson, right, more or less, and then your minor league prospects, your Sproats, you have Christian Scott too. Also, you can't forget Christian Scott. But, with how uncertain he kind of looked in some parts of 2024, are you really going to, be comfortable with him as an every 5th day starter versus maybe a 6-man guy? In a perfect world scenario, Christian Scott is my hybrid 6-man, 6th starter, and you just boot Tyler McGill to purgatory. I don't know where you got to, move Tyler McGill, but that's would be the perfect scenario in my mind, is that Tyler McGill is in the minor leagues. Christian Scott is your hybrid 6th guy. He's coming off of an injury. You don't know how, he's youthful as well. You don't know how he's going to really shake out. And then you kind of trade and free agency. Now, again, I just told you that this free agent market outside of those top guys is a little sparse. It's a little few and far between. And so when you kind of segue, into this Burns Snell Fried topic, you have to assess your chances of landing one of those big fishes in the pond if you're David Stearns. Do they have a realistic, option or a chance to sign a Corbin Burns if the Dodgers are also a suitor and he kind of likes that organization and likes being on the West Coast? I know we talked about this briefly before, but obviously I want to get your thoughts and opinions on here as well. So what I'm trying to get at here in this little rant that I'm having is that, yes, you can definitely trade to backfill the rotation and replace the production of a Manaea or Severino. That's obviously a little bit more of a riskier route. But, if you're David Stearns, you also might just think about giving Sean Manaea the extra couple of $1 million to satisfy him and just make sure that he comes back in through the doors, because he's a guy that you've already worked with. You know his mechanics. The pitching coach and Jeremy Hefner already knows him. So you don't have to kind of work from the ground up in that perspective. Now, again, how much is too much and how much are we willing to budge here on Sean Manaea? Are we talking 18 to 20, 20 to 22, or 22 plus, right? Those are the differences that I'm talking about. But again, when you look at your top guys and you look at the difference between the top guys and the mid-tier guys, there's a very large difference in this market. And, if you're expecting, and this is what I'm going to say, because this is the entire point of what I'm trying to say, if you're expecting the Mets to build out this rotation through free agency strictly, I would be very wary about that. Yep. And I'm talking about free agency in terms of the external free agents, right? Not including Severino or Manaea. This is the case where both of those guys walk. What's left out there in the market, for me, really isn't feasible to build a rotation that is light years better than what the Mets had in 2024, strictly through free agency. So again, internal candidates are obviously an option. They're always a hit or miss, a shot in the dark. Obviously, you have the big fishes in the pond here, Burns, Snell, Fried, a risk to try to, rely on those types of pitchers to walk through the doors, given the situation around the league. But again, I think it might be in the Mets' best interest to expand just a little bit. I'm not saying to go ahead and get crazy with it, but if it's necessary to outbid a certain team and you have to expand a couple $1 million per year to retain said guy, this is more so for Sean Manaea than Luis Severino. I might just think about doing it.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing, right? Because I do think a trade's going to happen for a pitcher, right? I'm not talking about a top line starter. I'm talking about like a mid-level starter, like a number 3, maybe even a number 4, something like that. And we got to remember, guys, we still have too many infield prospects, right? At some point, you just can't leave them in the minor leagues and let them rot. Either they're going to lose value staying in the minors, or you use them for assets. That's what good teams do. People talk about the Mets being the Dodgers, the way they offload, prospects time and time again and still replenish their farm system over and over again. That's how they got Glass now, right? That was a big thing last offseason as well. So you have to remember, at some point, your infield is getting very crowded, especially with the revamp or the shocking Vientos situation where he established himself at least at in the infield. Who knows if he would move to first base or not, depending on the Pete Alonso situation. But say if Vientos is your third baseman of the future, you got Lindor for so many more years, right? Your second base is kind of probably either going to be Acuna, McNeil, Mauricio, right? It's going to be one of those guys. And then at first base, say if the Mets do re-sign Pete Alonso, your infield is basically set. So you have all these infield prospects in Williams, Mauricio, Acuna. You can go on and on down the lower levels on the minor league. You're going to have to start using those guys as potential pieces for other assets. Not just saying it for pitching, but in general. So, and David Stearns knows what he's doing with that as well. Right. And he even talked about when it comes to the pitching side that he wasn't that impressed, or he didn't say impressed, but he wasn't, he didn't like what he's seen from a lot of the guys in the minors, except for Sproat, who had a really good season, but he dropped off a little bit at the end. A lot of our pitchers that we were expecting possibly to see this year in 2024, they kind of had down seasons. So you can't go into this offseason thinking that one of those guys are going to step up in spring training. If they do, great. That's an extra arm you can think about, going into the season, maybe a little bit later into the season. But David Stearns can't work on saying, well, if Sproat looks good in spring training, he can be in the rotation, or Vazel, or anybody else that you want to bring up as a pitching prospect. So he has to go into this offseason thinking that none of those guys are going to be ready to go start in the 2025 season. So that's why it's going to be very crucial to see if Stearns is really going hard after the big name, at least one of them, to be at the top of the rotation, and then a lot of one-year deals once again when you go into the back of the 4th, 5th, because he did talk about a 6-man rotation that he wants to do that. So how do you do that? You got to add more guys. You got to have more depth. And I do wonder if he's going to prioritize one of those 3 guys that we see on the screen here big time, and then maybe give that one multi-year deal to a mid-tier guy like a Manaea or maybe a Walker Buehler or so on and so forth, or just make that trade. So that's going to be the interesting part. But would I give Manaea the 4th year? Yes, because I don't see signs of him breaking down. I think when it comes to lefties, they seem to get better with age a lot of the time. And when Manaea found his new way, his new mechanics, new way of pitching, you're getting a whole new pitcher that we actually got in June, late June of last year. That's the pitcher we're going to get. Now, results are going to be hopefully the same. But again, there's a book out on Sean Manaea now that just because he looked good this year doesn't mean that, teams are not going to pick him up this year and see how he does this year. There's a book on him now that, they've seen him before. That doesn't mean the results are going to be there. So you also have to take that into consideration as well. But when it comes to Sean Manaea, Chris said he would do it. I would too. I think I would, because I would trust Sean Manaea if I know he's going to be my number 3, right? If he's my number 3, I'm okay with that. I don't want Sean Manaea as my number 2, because if he's on number 2, that means the Mets missed out on the big starters. And that means Kodai Senga is going to be our guy, or maybe a guy that's not Burns, Snell, or Fried in that second tier of pitchers. You get one of those guys to be at the top of the rotation as well. I want Sean Manaea. If we do get him, he's in the middle of that rotation instead of the top 2 of the rotation. That means the Mets had a good offseason, in my opinion.
It's supply and demand, Rob. It really is supply and demand. The supply for premier starters in this market is, not good. Let's face it. We just said that. And then the demand is going to be high, for teams across the league. And, fortunately for Sean Manaea, that means his value is going to go past what his normal market value is. And that's just the fact of the matter. And the same thing can be said for, other pitchers in this league. And that's why Blake Snell presumably, turned that offer down, that player option, because one, he wanted a long-term deal last offseason. No one believed in him enough to give it to him, right? At least at his asking price. And then also, right, he's like, okay, fine, I'll sign a 2-year deal with the player option for the 2nd year. I'll prove myself. And he did. He was great to end the season for the Giants. And he's like licking his chops now because he sees this free agent market. Obviously, you have, he has the names right next to him on either side of our screen. But then he's like, everybody else, I'm better than. So it really all depends in terms of what the demand of each of these guys, of these names are going to be. Like I just said, there's a handful of teams in this league that can afford the services of Fried, Snell, and Burns. The Mets are one of them. But there is a whole plethora of teams in this league that can afford the services of Sean Manaea, being one of those mid-tier guys. And that's what makes it harder, and it'll naturally draw the prices up. And that's what we're seeing year after year after year. Guys are going for way above what their market value is. And it's just simply the name of the game, and it's just a supply and demand effect. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that, Kodai Senga, obviously, he's going to be there at the top of your rotation. Ideally, if the Mets have a good offseason, you'll find a co-ace with him, maybe even bump him down to the 2. I would love Sean Manaea. I think if you really want to build a solid rotation, Manaea would be your 3. And I think that even if you re-sign a Sean Manaea and they're successful in doing so, right, if they give him a 3-year deal, 4-year deal, doesn't matter. Hopefully it's around that $20 million mark. There's still going to be real players for one of these names here on your screen or a trade. Now, the trade market gets interesting. I see, Garrett Crochet's name talked about a lot. I see Alcantara, right? Sandy. I know he's coming off of an injury, but a lot of people want to talk about Sandy Alcantara in terms of if the Marlins move him or not. You got a handful of other guys that we can talk about, and we will talk about this offseason because, it's not going to be, we're not going to see trades happening, within this week, at least not any major ones that I can foreshadow. So I think that once the trade market gets going and it sets itself, and the teams that are going to be selling at this, we talk about selling at the trade deadline, the teams that are also going to be sellers in the offseason, they will establish themselves, and then it's going to be smooth sailing from there. But unfortunately, the job is easy for us to talk about. It's hard for David Stearns to actually go ahead and make those phone calls and negotiate. So we'll see exactly what happens. But again, the Mets have a lot of different avenues in terms of the routes that they can actually go. And that's the key thing to note here. And yes, 100%, I agree with you. I'm all for, this is what we were talking about last Mets Hot Stove in terms of, actually proving or believing in these prospects, that when we talked about it mostly from the offensive perspective, but we're also talking about it from the pitching perspective as well. You have your Tidwells, you have your Sproats, even your Christian Scotts, right? In terms of, we know what he has and what he has potential wise, but we didn't see enough of it, unfortunately, before his injury at the MLB level. So can we really entrust, and can David Stearns really entrust him to be one of those 5 main guys? Something that I really don't want to happen, because I think that, if this happens, then the Mets put themselves in a really bad spot in terms of, the pitching market, whether it's free agency or the trades. But another name that we haven't talked about much, and I know that you were kind of a fan of him, and I know that a lot of people are speculating whether they want to bring him back or not as like a 5th type starter, is Jose Quintana, which would be a 1-year deal. If at the very minimum, right, all else fails, you need to fill out your rotation. Maybe you got your ace, right? Maybe they signed a guy like Max Fried or Corbin Burns, right? But they kind of want to focus their attention elsewhere, and the trade market isn't presenting itself, and you need that 5th starter because you don't want to entrust in Tyler McGill. There's other veterans out there that you can kind of do that with for a 1-year deal or so. Again, I'm not advocating for that whatsoever. So for those of you all watching at home, don't think that I am, because I am probably I was the biggest anti-Quintana guy this past 2024, and he proved me wrong time and time and time again. But again, in terms of the flexibility that the Mets have, there's a couple of different ways to go about it. But I really do think that if the Mets don't land a co-ace, right? I should rephrase this. If the Mets go into 2025, regardless of what happened in 2024, with Senga still as their ace, no co-ace, right? And Senga's the number 1 option, and the Mets have to bank on that. I think in terms of doing your due diligence, in terms of putting yourself in the best position, because what are we really talking about this offseason, Rob? We're talking about obviously continuously beating, Braves, the Phillies, etc. But we're talking about getting on the same tier, if not past the Dodgers. That's what we need to be prioritizing and comparing ourselves with. Compare yourselves to the best. How do you get past the Dodgers? Kodai Senga being your number 1 probably won't cut it in my mind, especially over the course of 162 with the lack of innings he threw, right? And how he looked in the postseason. Again, he's going to be a great pitcher, and I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to produce in 2025 for the New York Mets. But having to rely on that is a mistake, and therefore you can confidently say, I'm not sure if you're willing to say it yourself, but I would say it would be a failure of a season if you're going into 2020, an offseason, I should say, if you're going into 2025 with Kodai Senga as your lone ace. On November 3rd, right, tonight, I'm stating that right now.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. If you go into the season with Kodai Senga as your ace, you failed to get a top starter. Let's be honest about that. And not saying that the Mets can't get Juan Soto and, bring back Pete Alonso or, get Christian Walker, whatever it might be. But say the position players are successful offseason. I don't see how anybody can feel confident in a guy who didn't pitch last year basically at all. What do you have, like 11 inning start pitches, 11 innings last year? I'm not confident in a guy who did not pitch last year. Like, you can't be, because you don't know what you're going to get from him, right? And it's not saying that Kodai Senga can't be good on the mound, right? But you can't say that you have confidence in him when he was out basically the entire season, right? You're playing with fire there. That means you're going to have to rely on, if you do sign Manaea or everybody else who you bring in, you got to put a lot more stock in David Peterson being a whole new David Peterson we saw last year. You're hoping that's the case. That's the issue that you're going to run into. That's why the Mets need an ace. right? There's no confidence. If you have confidence in Kodai Senga, then you must have slept through the 2024 season. And, last time you were up, you were watching 2023, right? You can't do that. You got to be careful with that because you know what that sounds like to me again? 2016 New York Mets all over again, right? 2015 was supposed to be on that transition year, and 2016 was supposed to be the year the Mets go for it. Same thing this year. That's why I keep on referencing 2015 as a very similar year than 2024. Then as 2024, because of those years were supposed to be the year to get the young guys in there, see who's establishing themselves, maybe make a couple of trades at the deadline to bring in more prospects and save a lot of money on payroll. And then 2016 was supposed to be the year. Same thing this year, whereas 2025 was supposed to be the year they spend big, really establish themselves, really be contenders. Very similar. But you got to the NLCS. In 2015, you got to the World Series, right? I don't want a repeat of 2016 where you did minimal off-season additions, regardless of who was the owner, right? The Mets had every opportunity to get better after the 2015 season when they were a couple of wins away to winning the World Series. They could have got back there. You see the Royals do it. You see the Cubs do it. The year prior to them losing, they got back and won the World Series. Why? Because they made themselves better. We got within 2 games of the World Series. I want to get better than that. Now, how do you do that? You got to do that during the offseason. And that's where you have to remember that we got so spoiled by this year. You can't lose focus on what 2025 was and is supposed to be. This was the year we were supposed to spend big. This was the year we were supposed to be contenders. We can't lose focus on that. Just because last year was successful, you can't just say, Senga's going to be back, and Manaea could be as good as this year. Well, what if we do bring back Severino? Oh, what if we don't make really big moves, but bring back Pete Alonso and maybe get a mid-tier right fielder instead of the Anthony Santanders or the Juan Soto? You get the third best thing, right? I think you might fall short there. You can't lose perspective on what 2025 is supposed to be. And that's the year to contend. Just because 2024 was successful and it was a shocker, just like 2015, going into 2016, you can't lose focus on that goal. And if you do that, you're going to be in big trouble. Because I feel it's going to be a disappointment because now you got to have another surprise season with guys that have too many question marks. I don't want too many question marks going into 2025. That's a dangerous proposition for me.
Which is why this is a perfect segue in terms of go sign Juan Soto, because that is the best option to mitigate a questionable outfield that you now have. And, I kind of want to get your thoughts and opinions because that was a perfect segue, honestly, right? When we talk about pitching, obviously it's a glaring hole. It's going to start with Manaea and the Mets' decision to bring him back. But also, right, we've been seeing all these updates on Juan Soto. Right. I posted a poll on my community tab on my channel talking about what, the subscribers and Mets fans on my channel are thinking in terms of what his final number is going to be in terms of the contract as a whole. And we also saw some comments from Ron Darling saying that he's kind of skeptical in terms of, whether he would, allocate all those resources to a Juan Soto. And I'm just like, if the goal is to beat the Dodgers, right, and beat all the teams that the Mets were able to get past, leading up to the Dodgers series, why would you not allocate all of your resources to try to sign Juan Soto? Because even if you are successful, you are still going to have more resources, and signing Juan Soto is not going to handcuff you from going out and fulfilling a lot of other, holes that are on this team. It's just simply not. The president of baseball operations told you himself that the Mets have a lot of financial flexibility, right? He told you that, what was it, a week and a half ago now? So why are we scared to go out and spend the most money of every MLB team on Juan Soto? I get it, right? People don't believe in his defense. Okay. But when you take a look at the best possible lineup that the Mets can throw out there, Juan Soto's name is in it. Now, I will caveat this, right? I'll caveat this and say, if the Mets don't get Juan Soto, it does not mean they had an unsuccessful offseason, because there are a lot of other ways. The flip side can be true. Not handcuffing yourself, for $40, $50 million to one player obviously gives you more flexibility. That's an obvious, right? And you can still have a successful offseason, which was where my poll today that I posted was trying to get at. What your plan B option immediately would be. You can go out there and sign, or re-sign a Pete Alonso and then get a Teoscar Hernandez and an Anthony Santander and kind of spread your lineup out evenly. But you can also go out there, and I've said this time and time again, and I really do think it's feasible. You can go out there and get a Juan Soto, and you can still sign Pete Alonso if you want, or you can go out there and get Christian Walker, right? You don't have to handcuff yourself just because you go out there and give Juan Soto $40, $45, $50 million. It's just simply not the case. So I get the skepticism, especially from Ron Darling's, perspective. And he's not the only one. There's a lot of Mets fans that are kind of weary about giving this kind of money to Juan Soto. But it's like, when are we going to stop being scared to just go out there and spend big time? The Dodgers weren't scared. I'm not sure if the deferred money is something that Juan Soto would be interested in. You don't have to make it deferred if you really don't. If you really would turn that down, it would be nice to give you even more flexibility while signing, him. I'm not sure if Scott Boras is going to let that happen or not. I don't know how that works out. But again, why are we so scared? Can I just ask the general public that, like, as Mets fans, why are we scared and why are we skeptical? One of the best generational talents, right? Last year was Shohei Ohtani. He wanted to stay on the West Coast. He wanted to go to the Dodgers. Another guy that presents itself, probably not at the same level as Shohei Ohtani, obviously, in terms of, having that capability, being a pitcher and a hitter in terms of however you want to assess their talent and whatever gap that there may be. But again, the next quote unquote best option in terms of generational talents, a 26-year-old phenom, no less, it presents himself on the market, and you're going to try to sell me on something, on a point that we shouldn't go after him when the whole goal is to try to get on the Dodgers level? Come on. I can't rationalize that to myself, Rob. I can't.
Again, it is the scared Met fans of the ghost of yesteryear. That's the problem. It's the Jason Bay contract. It's all these big contracts that didn't work out for the Mets, and they are scared of it. I'm sorry, guys, but a 26-year-old who is a World Series champion, who was an MVP, is a guy that basically took the entire Yankees team with Aaron Judge on his shoulders, and took the Yankees to the World Series, who didn't deserve to be there. Why do we forget that stuff, right? We know he's not the greatest outfielder. We completely understand that, right? But there's more intangibles than what that guy brings to a team, right? The Yankees would have never got to the World Series if it wasn't for Juan Soto, right? Go back to the World Series of 2019. Juan Soto was a beast at 19 years old. We forget that, right? Everybody worries about the 12-year deal, right? You can't complain that you have Steve Cohen money, and then a lot of fans who don't want Soto were bitching about this offseason prior. You can't have it both ways, right? You can't be scared of signing one guy, because here's the difference of the Wilpon Mets and the Steve Cohen Mets. If Juan Soto's contract ends up being a disaster, Steve Cohen already has shown you that he would pay for that mistake and still put competitive teams on the field. Scherzer, Verlander, how quickly we forget, right? They were an afterthought this year. Why is that? Because he paid away the problem and traded it away while basically having sunk cost into this team to know that he can make this team better and their farm system better during that same time frame.
Well, I will say it would be a little bit of apples to oranges though, because that was like 1 year or 2 years versus like an additional, 6 or 7. But I get what you're saying though.
But if anybody thinks that Juan Soto was just going to fall off the face of the map at 26 years old, you're nuts. And I'm not saying that he's going to have MVP seasons for 7 straight years, right? Guys take off when they're 29, 30, 31 years old. That's the prime years, right? You saw Bryce Harper, right, having outstanding seasons around that age, even not having quote unquote MVP seasons, but is still one of the best players, if not the best player on the Phillies, right? I look at that where Harper was basically the same age as, by the way, on the same team, by the way, with the Nationals, right? Those guys you saw, I'm putting Soto and Harper in the same category. Why is that? Because they were basically the same age when they came into the league and becoming free agents near around the same age. Those years are just coming up for Juan Soto, right? And again, is he ever going to be an outstanding right fielder? Probably not, right? But the kid still won a World Series. He basically put the Nationals on their back. He put the Yankees on their back. In 6 years in Major League Baseball, he's took 2 teams to the World Series, won one of them, and one team that didn't deserve to be there in the New York Yankees, he basically did it himself. He was basically their best player, right? When do we...
I'm kind of confused in terms of what Ken is saying here, Rob. What has Harper won? What has Harper won? He's saying Harper's a winner. What has Harper won?
Harper hasn't won, right? When Harper left, the Nationals won with Juan Soto, right? So Harper's not a winner. The Phillies have not won since they had him. They've lost the World Series, they lost the NLCS, they lost the NLDS over the last 3 seasons. The Nationals were choke artists in the playoffs with Harper there. When he left, they won the World Series with Juan Soto. So Harper's not a winner, right? You can't say Soto's a winner, not a winner, and Harper is. And you're going to say Soto's about the money, yet Harper took the best deal. So he's about the money as well. You can't have it both ways. Again, Ken, you don't like Juan Soto. That's fine. So you're going to have a bias against him. But don't tell me that Harper's a winner when he's won shit. And teams that actually, the team that he left won the World Series the next year, tell me that's not a bigger sign of him being the problem. Sorry. Ken, no, I didn't say Soto won because of him alone, but he took 2 teams to the World Series that basically didn't deserve to be there. Juan Soto was on a 500 team with the Nationals. He became the MVP that season. He was the best player in baseball, rookie of the year. He was the best player in baseball and took that team to the World Series at 19 years old and won it. He was their best player, right? This year, the same thing. If the Yankees go on to win the World Series, it was probably Juan Soto being the MVP. That's how good he was. So you're so concerned about the number when you think Steve Cohen's just going to buy Juan Soto and then that's the team. That's it. No, right? Yes, it takes other guys, but this is the problem with Mets fans. This is why I continue to say that. I think you guys want to be losers. I truly believe that because you bitch and moan that they don't spend money. This was the whole Wilpon era, that they don't spend money. They bitch and moan. And then when things go wrong, it was like, well, look, you see the Dodgers, you see the Phillies, you see the Braves, you see the Dodgers spend all this money and you never do it. And then they win World Series. They make the playoffs every year. And then you complain in the offseason that, oh, well, they didn't do enough. They should have done this at the deadline. They should have signed this guy. You should have signed that guy. Stop being afraid, because if you're going to continue to be afraid, you're never going to win, right? Steve Cohen has more than enough money to do what he needs to do other than Juan Soto. You got to stop. It's embarrassing. It really is embarrassing. You got to stop. Yeah, Ken, you see how players perform, but Soto was the guy that got the Yankees there, right? Aaron Judge dropped that ball. Garrett Cole didn't cover first base. Anthony Volpe didn't throw the ball to Jazz Chisholm's glove. They had a balk, right? There was a lot of things that went into that inning and that the whole series basically, right? It was Aaron Judge batting 180. Like, you got to remember that, right? Juan
That
Soto.
lineup was garbage, man. I'm sorry. That lineup was garbage. Outside of those two guys and even Aaron Judge, like you said, was a no-show in the playoffs. That lineup was pretty bad.
Miley said Mets have the highest payroll. Again, you're looking at just payroll, but that payroll is not even on the team. And on top of that, again, you had the one of the top three payrolls, two of the top three payrolls in baseball. Somebody's gonna lose. Like, we act like the highest teams the highest payrolls in baseball have been winning World Series left and right when it hasn't been the case. This was an anomaly this year. The two best teams and the two of the three highest payrolls in baseball made the World Series. That hasn't happened in a while, guys. So we got to remember that as well. And the Yankees payroll is way too high for a team that they throw out there. Jazz Chisholm out of position. Anthony Volpe, not as good as everybody thought, right? John Carlos Stanton is on his last leg, right? You got to remember that, guys.
To add on to that, Robert, if the Mets give Soto $50 million, they would be even with the 2025 Yankees payroll starting out. Let's just put that into perspective because a lot of money is coming off the books. I know we're talking about 2024 and the Mets having a $317 million payroll. 85 million of that 317 million was tied up in dead money in terms of guys that weren't on the team. But I'm talking about 2025 strictly because this is the offseason as we're heading into 2025. You see here the numbers of the Mets payroll right on your screen. The white text right there that Rob put for you all as the viewers to look at, right? If the Mets hand Soto a big contract, they will match the payroll that the Yankees have allocated and tied up right now going into 2025. Just food for thought there.
And here's the difference, as you just brought that up, right? If the Yankees get Juan Soto, their offseason is done.
Basically, yes.
If the Mets get Juan Soto, their offseason is just starting. That's what people forget, right? They had their owner say that a $300 million is not sustainable when the guy across town basically had that ever since he became owner. We have to remember that as well. So the Mets offseason doesn't end or die with Juan Soto, right? You can claim, and Yankee fans might shy away from this, but if they don't get Juan Soto, they're very much in trouble. That's a fact. That's why when people talk about, and this is not me and Chris saying that Juan Soto is make or break in the Mets offseason, because that's not true. The Mets can go in other routes. You know why? Because the Mets have Lindor, who should really be the MVP, right? The Mets have a star in the making at third base in Mark Vientos, right? They still do have Brandon Nimmo in left field. They have a young catcher that we believe is going to be a superstar in this league in Francisco Alvarez. So there's not a lot of positions that they have holes where you say, well, oh boy, because all the Yankees have is Aaron Judge. And that's a guy who doesn't perform in the postseason. And the Yankee fans are this close to booing him every time on opening day because of his postseason. So
we haven't even talked about the Garrett Cole situation, and we won't go down that rabbit hole either. But they've got a lot to figure out this offseason. It's anything but a certainty for them.
And Ken says Mets' top priority is bullpen. No, it's not. It is a priority, but if you're going to put the Mets bullpen at the top of the list, then you're already going into the season, with a negative attitude. Because the bullpen, even though the bullpen remember, the bullpen didn't get the Mets anywhere this year, right? It was the starting pitching, and it was offensive performances that we weren't expecting to get that helped us put us over the top here. Like, let's remember that, right? And by the way, the Yankees and the Dodgers had two of the best bullpens in the postseason, right? And look what happened, right? It wasn't the bullpen that basically took over the game, the series. It was the Dodgers starting pitching and the offense. That's what it was. So we have to remember that, right? Is the bullpen important? Absolutely. But the bullpens are a crapshoot every year. We all have to remember that. Right? That's why when I say, besides a Tanner Scott or an A.J. Minter, you ain't going to get guys on 2, 3, 4-year deals in the bullpen. You're going to get a lot of 1-year deals other than the two guys I just mentioned. So the bullpen isn't a top priority over position players and starting pitching. The Mets have no rotation. The Mets have holes position player wise for the most part, especially in the outfield. So those are priorities. The bullpen, you can always get bullpen, right? You don't have to start the season with the best bullpen in baseball. Bullpens are usually always established trade deadline. Look at the years of a lot of teams, and a lot of teams that gone to the playoffs and made runs. It was guys that they got at the trade deadline. Not saying that you need a garbage bullpen going into the season. I think you could do a good job with the bullpen, but you don't have to overspend. As pitching is always a priority, but bullpens now are so fickle that
it's high turnover rate. It's high turnover rate with these guys.
And I rather give the money to the position players because 9 out of 10 times it's a lot safer of a contract long term than any starting pitcher or bullpen are. So I worry about giving a lot of money and years to position players because those contracts usually work out better than pitching deals. So I'm not saying don't go after Tanner Scott or AJ Minter. I think those are the guys you should target. But the other ones are, 1-year deals. That's what you're going to get here, right? Look at all the teams. Look at the Padres that had a great bullpen. Look at the Dodgers. Look at the Yankees. A lot of these guys are guys that they got off the scrap heap. Guys that are on 1-year deals, veterans that are on minor league deals that actually established themselves during the season. It wasn't guys that had long-term deals. Who was the closer for the Dodgers? One day it was Hudson. One day it was Trinan. One day, it was another guy. It wasn't the Dodgers didn't even have an established closer. The Yankees didn't have an established closer. Yeah, Luke Weaver, but it wasn't until late into the season. Both of those teams made the World Series. Right?
And then look at the flip side. And the Phillies, they had a good bullpen, and look how they did against the New York Mets.
Yeah.
They crapped the bed. So, yeah, I agree with you. It's such there's a lot of different variables that go into the bullpen. And I completely agree with you, Rob. And if it's one guy that I trust to find quality arms that may not be so popular, but at the end of the day, when the season comes around, when the late game situations come around and you need these guys to perform, it's David Stearns. I'm willing to take my chances on David Stearns finding bullpen arms. But as soon as we get, when we get back into this Juan Soto conversation, right, it doesn't have to be just Mets versus Yankees, right?
No.
It doesn't have to be just Mets versus Yankees. It doesn't. Sure. It can be the Giants. I know it's not likely that he goes out there, but they're going to offer him probably. They're going to be in on the sweepstakes. They got money to spend. The Blue Jays, I've heard, they've got a hole burning in their wallet. There's other teams in this league that will give this guy the money if all else fails with the two New York teams. They will. And you look at the deferred money for the Dodgers with Ohtani, I mean, they might not be out on it as well. And I know that Heyman keeps on pushing this agenda of the Dodgers being in on Soto, and he's kind of the spokesperson for Mr. Scott Boras. But, it is what it is. Listen, I think it's going to come down between the two New York teams. But again, other teams are going to be in on him, and they are going to at least offer a contract. So it is Mets versus Yankees, but it doesn't just have to be in terms of our conversations. But I'll say, again, the main point here is that the Mets obviously have done their due diligence in terms of checking in on him. Obviously, no money being talked about yet, but you know what I mean? They are very serious. And there's been rumblings that, Steve Cohen, I really do think Steve Cohen, this is not the guy that he wants to let get away. And I think that if you have that mentality as the owner of your organization, of the organization that we root for, we're in good hands. Again, it doesn't have to be a situation where Juan Soto walks elsewhere. The Mets don't get Juan Soto. Oh, it's automatically a failure of an offseason. It could still be successful. It would just dampen my mood a little bit. I'm not going to lie to you. It would dampen the mood.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Juan Soto's target number one for Steve Cohen. Yamamoto was priority number one for Steve Cohen. He did everything he can to get Yamamoto. Yamamoto just drove up the price where the Dodgers got a little nervous and they matched, and they never went back to Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen wanted Yamamoto. And if Steve Cohen did what he did for Yamamoto, going to Japan multiple times, meeting his family, giving the highest offer that the Dodgers matched, but then Yamamoto never went back to the Mets, right? If Steve Cohen did that much homework and that much energy in Yamamoto, what do you think he's going to do with Juan Soto when we already know it's been established, not just by reporters, but just internal people of the New York Mets talking about Steve Cohen wants Juan Soto? What do you think he's going to do for Juan Soto? He's going to wine, dine him again throughout this offseason. Steve Cohen and I forgot who said, I think it was Kevin, who's a Dodger fan, said that the Dodgers are only going to try to drive up the price for Juan Soto. I don't think they're going to get him. Yeah, I agree with that, right? You want to drive up the price, so it makes it harder for other teams, specifically in the National League, to get him. But that favors the Mets, right? Drive up the price. Because I don't think he's going to the Dodgers. I think Juan Soto is an East Coast guy. He wants to be on the East Coast. He was not happy with the Padres. He even spoke about it. He wants to be on the East Coast. So you would think the Phillies might be in on him, the Mets, the Yankees, maybe another, Toronto, right? I think he's going to be on the East Coast. So the West Coast, I don't think it's happening for Juan Soto unless they give him $1 billion. And that's probably not going to happen. So, and we also have to remember, overall, the offseason is not a disappointment if Juan Soto was not a New York Met. The Mets can still be really good to get really good players. And that leads us to the rapid fire segment, right? Burns, Snell, and Fried, right? I think if you want to put it, Chris, I'll give you the first rapid fire question. And this rapid fire segment, guys, is just throwing out names and saying yay and nay for the Mets to go after or even sign, right? Let's start with that topic right there. Burns, Snell, Fried. If you have to rank them, what would you rank them as the Mets' number one target?
Obviously, it depends on the amount of years on each of the contracts. I think that if I had a choice, I'd go Burns, Fried, Snell. That's how I would rank them. And I get that, Fried dealt with an injury recently, but let's not forget, over the course of the last 4 seasons, he's also pitched 160 plus innings in 3 of the last 4 seasons. So I think his track record is proven. I would say Burns, Fried, Snell, but the last 2 are kind of a toss up. I just give Fried a little bit of the edge, just kind of like an FU to the Braves organization, maybe.
Yeah. Burns is obviously number one. Like I like availability. I like a guy who throws a good amount of innings. That means he stays in ball games, unlike Blake Snell. I would rank him the same way. Burns, Snell, Burns, Fried, Snell. But again, it's a toss up with the 2 other guys. Fried has been often injured, which is a little scary to me. And Snell is a 5-inning pitcher. Occasionally, we'll go longer in a game. Right? He will frustrate you throughout the season. Right? Very good pitcher for 5 innings, but then he got to use the tremendous amount of bullpen in that start. And that always worries me in every start because Blake Snell is so good, but very frustrating because a guy can be pitching great and he's coming out in the 5th inning. That annoys the hell out of me. And I don't want to destroy our bullpen with a guy who's pitching well and you take him out every time because you don't want to go past the 5th inning. That's a problem to me. So Burns, 1. I'm going to go Fried 2, even though he's often injured. I think with Fried pitches, he's really damn good. So, and he will give you length if he's healthy. So I would go Burns, Fried, Snell. Another rapid fire. I'm going to go with Juan Soto, Anthony Santander. Now, obviously, it's Juan Soto, but in perspective, contract-wise, talent-wise, age-wise, production-wise, ranking Juan Soto number 1, obviously. Would you start favoring a little bit towards Anthony Santander, Chris?
Over Juan Soto?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Give me Juan Soto. Give me Juan Soto.
All right. I was just curious because, Anthony Santander is a very good player. And, obviously, Anthony Santander is an MVP count. Or he's probably on the lower tier of that MVP line. But Juan Soto is an MVP, right? I don't think, you are losing a little bit. I think the the energy and the bravado that Soto brings, I think, along with his talent, is next level. But again, if the Mets sign Anthony Santander, Corbin Burns, and a Christian Walker for first base, that's a pretty damn good offseason, considering that what the Mets did in 2024, which wasn't much. So I think it would be crazy. And no, $500 million doesn't matter. I think it's.
I agree. I don't think $500 million matters. I don't think $600 million matters either. To be honest,
about us caring about it. I don't think Steve Cohen cares about it. I think Steve Cohen thinks that Juan Soto is worth it, jersey sales wise and on the field wise, and what the dynamic he brings to the teams. Because there's no mistaking that Juan Soto puts a team on the next level. And it was established with the Nationals and the Yankees. So that's something that it's not about us caring about that money. If Steve Cohen doesn't care about that money, why the hell should I? Now, if the Mets only sign Juan Soto and nobody else, then I would be concerned. But if the Mets get Juan Soto, bring back Pete Alonso, and bring Corbin Burns in here, nobody's going to give a shit about $600 million or $500 million. Because if Steve Cohen doesn't care, I don't care. I think that's where we kind of lose that perspective a little bit. All right. Now when it comes to the bullpen, Tanner Scott, AJ Minter, which one you want?
Oh, man.
You up last hot stuff, so I had to get you on that.
Oh, man. I think Minter can give you – I think you can get a better deal for Minter. So I'll give me Minter. I'll take Minter.
Interesting. All right. Now, last but not least, it's the middle tier people. Ryan Stanek, Phil Maton, right? Guys like that. I'm not saying directly them, but in that next tier of bullpen arms, not the elite closer, 8th inning guy, but guys that are in that third tier. Give me 3 names that you think off the top of your head. But obviously, take Minter out of it. If you want him, that's one. Who is the other 2 guys you want in this bullpen to have that bridge to Diaz? Final question.
Are you talking about like free agents or guys that are already in this bullpen?
Whatever you want.
I mean, Stanek, I'd definitely re-sign him. I think I said that in one of my live streams as well a couple of days ago. I'd definitely re-sign Stanek. I think he's going to take $2.5 million, maybe around there for 1 year. I would re-sign him. That's a hard question, Rob. Bridge guys. I mean, I like the bullpen with what we got right now in terms of what we have as a core. If that's what you're kind of asking me, I'd have to take a look at the free agent list for those mid-tier guys or lower-tier guys to bring in. But I like your core of obviously Diaz. If you bring Ryan Stanek back, I'm confident. I like Reed Garrett. I like Jose Butto. So like I like what we're cooking with here. Maybe you want to provide. So my backfire to that is that if I'm bringing Ryan Stanek back, is he going to open up 2025 as my 8th inning guy? What do you think on that? Or do you think that there's an opportunity to sort of shift it around, maybe give Reed Garrett that title instead? What do you think?
I like the Ryan Stanek. I think either Minter or Scott is a must, one of those guys. So if you bring back, if you get Stanek and one of those 2 lefties and add another, I say, quality arm, I'm okay with that. I think you got to be satisfied with that bullpen because I think Butto's going to have a really good season. I think he's established himself in the bullpen, even though he broke down at the end. I think it was just the innings that caught up to him, right? I do like that. If you get Stanek, Butto, Diaz, and say, let's go with AJ Minter, right? You got that big time lefty. You basically got your 6, 7, 8 guy, and obviously Diaz is your closer. You're going to need obviously other guys. Maybe a Foley would come back, or maybe even another quality arm that might be, another guy that can pitch you multiple innings that you get on the free agent market. And those guys, Ryan Stanek's probably going to cost you a 1-year deal. Minter might cost you 2, 3, along with a Tanner Scott or AJ Minter, maybe a 2-year deal. So that's something to actually look at. But I'm okay with what you just said. I think we'll be fine at getting those 2 guys and another quality bullpen on with that, along with what you already have.
Question for you, I guess, if we're doing this rapid fire, 2 names that are were already Mets, right? Technically, in the year of 2024, they either need a new contract or they need a new contract. Bullpen pieces: Drew Smith, Brooks Raley.
I'm probably leaning towards Brooks Raley more because I think with that funky lefty, right? We don't know if he's gonna throw. He didn't really throw hard, much, very, very hard as a lefty when he was healthy. So coming off the injury, do I think he will be throwing as hard? Even if he's throwing a little bit less, I think he's a pitcher, right? He's not a thrower. I think Drew Smith is a thrower, even though he showed a little bit of signs of finally becoming a pitcher. I feel more confident because I think Drew Smith and Raley is probably going to get a 1-year deal. I think the safest bet is Raley because now you got that extra lefty in there. If you do get a Minter or a Scott, I'm on board with Raley because I think he could still be a very solid lefty out of the bullpen, even if his stuff is a little bit diminished, because I think Raley actually goes on the mound actually being a pitcher and trying to get guys out, not just by throwing a baseball or aiming a baseball. He becomes a pitcher on the mound. Drew Smith, I don't trust enough. And I'd rather go with Raley over Drew Smith.
Yeah, I agree. I think Raley would be a great addition to have back. It just depends in terms of like what lefty you want. There's a plethora of lefties. There's like 4 different lefties that are on the free agency market, right? Tanner Scott, AJ Minter, Aroldis Chapman. There's one more that's pretty notable out there, and I'm forgetting his name. I don't have the list right in front of me, and I apologize about that. But like, people are saying in the chat here, David Robertson, 1-year deal. I know he's like ancient. He's like 39 years old or something like that, whatever. He pitched to the tune of a 3 ERA flat last year, right, for the Rangers. So I would kind of welcome that back too. Again, you're not tossing egregious money at these guys, but 1-year deals, right? Low risk, higher reward. I mean, sign me up. I'm sorry. I'm signing myself up for that all day long, to be honest with you. And Clay Holmes is another one that you have the stuff that's there with Clay Holmes. And again, adding on to the uncertainties surrounding the Yankees in terms of retaining Juan Soto, Garrett Cole, that whole fiasco that's going on, which I still don't even know what the whole Garrett Cole situation is. I know that he opted out, but that they have an opportunity to re-sign him or something like that.
They have until midnight tonight to add that extra year to keep the Yankees can basically block his opt-out if they add the extra year of $36 million and add in a 5th year to the 4-year deal. But what's weird, it's almost 11 o'clock or almost 10 o'clock, and they still haven't done that yet. And they got until midnight. So I'm a little skeptical of what the hell is going on here. And this is me continue to talk to Yankee fans and saying, I think Hal Steinbrenner is shedding payroll, guys. I don't think he wants to have a huge payroll again. So all you Juan Soto believers for the Yankees, be careful what you wish for, because your owner in 2 hours might not give that extra year to your ace. And I'm not saying the Mets should go after Garrett Cole or anything like that. I know that might be talked about if he does officially opt out and the Yankees don't give him that extra year. It would be interesting though. But at the end of the day, Clay Holmes, if he's not the closer, because he has really good stuff, and if you really take into perspective his years, they were really good. I just don't think he's a closer. I think he's a guy that's probably better in the 6th, 7th, even sometimes 8th inning role. Right? I think the Yankees abuse their relievers. I don't think the Yankees do a good job, right? Because they start off good and then they end up being bad. And the Yankees don't buy a lot of relievers. They get them from, minor leagues. They get them from anywhere. Excuse me. So I think Clay Holmes would be a nice option, but I don't want him to be the number 1 signing for the New York Mets. I think he needs to be better than that. But if Clay Holmes is going to be my 6th, 7th inning guy, I'm okay with that. He has really good stuff. So it's going to be very interesting with the bullpen. Stearns is a guy, I think he's going to find value in guys on 1-year deals. I don't think you're going to see a lot of 2-3-year deals in the bullpen because it's way too problematic every year with bullpens where a guy can have a great year and get paid and not be the same guy, right? What happened to Loop? He left the Mets and you never heard of him again, right? It's guys like that always concern me, and you see it all throughout baseball. So be careful if this guy had a good season and now you want him, because you might get the 2 years or the 1 year of a bad year. Way too, I would say, a little bit too fiery.
Volatile.
Like you're jumping in the fire a little bit. Yeah, volatile, exactly. So we'll see, guys. The free agency period starts 5 p.m. tomorrow. We got something special cooking up tomorrow at 5 p.m. And if you go back on my channel, you'll see what I'm talking about, as there's a very special frenzy that might go on at 5 p.m. live stream with myself, CP. I'm going to try to get some other people on there to have a little bit of a whole roundtable Mets discussion going forward with our New York Mets. So with that said, guys, that was our rapid fire. That was episode 2 of Mets Hot Stove Live. I will be putting episode 1 and 2 on all the podcast platforms by Monday. So you'll have access to just be listening to them on podcast form on episode 1 and 2. So Chris, final thoughts and let everybody know what's going on with the channel.
No, I appreciate it. This is a great episode 2. Again, we're just trying to get everybody involved in Mets talk here in the off season as free agency officially starts up. We want to do a little bit of like some pre-free agency talk with what's going on with the Mets, what the rumors are, what we foreshadow the Mets doing this offseason. And again, there's still a lot left to understand in terms of the route that this organization is going to take. There's so much flexibility, so many different routes. It's going to be fun to talk about. We got you all covered with the latest updates, reactions, news, all that fun stuff. No, we're not insiders. We won't claim to be insiders, but we'll give you the immediate reactions in terms of what we think about everything and anything that happens in this offseason. So buckle up. You'll be seeing a lot of us. Rob, there was like over 110 people in your chat on this episode. That's awesome. The turnout is awesome. Again, this is being streamed to both of our channels. Make sure you hit the thumbs ups on both channels. That helps us out immensely. This is awesome to get out on the podcasting platforms, like you said, Rob, as well. I can't wait, and I look forward to doing more of these. Hopefully you all are enjoying. I'm going to try to do daily, if not every other day, polls in terms of giving you all an opportunity as Mets fans to make your voices heard in terms of some what if scenarios that could present itself for the New York Mets. I did one on a potential Manaea extension. I did one today about the plan B options in terms of the bats if all else fails with Juan Soto, and there's a couple more as well that I posted. One was about Luis Severino. So pay attention to those community tab polls over on my channel. I'll be dropping a video within the next couple of days, right? As free agency starts, I'm going to try to get it out in the beginning of this week, talking about a compare and contrast between 2 first basemen, right? One is Pete Alonso. One is another guy that a lot of Mets fans have been talking about. You probably know who he is. Again, I kind of teased at it on my live stream that I did solo a couple days ago, but that's what I got planned for my channel again with these Mets Hot Stove Lives. Would be more than happy to go live tomorrow at 5 p.m. directly if we're able to set that up, Rob. Let me know. I'm available. Appreciate you all. Thank you for showing the support and love to us in terms of these streams. We're here to provide the content for you all again. This is going to be a very busy Mets offseason. I cannot wait for it to get started and for some of the more major moves to get kicked off, because I think David Stearns and Steve Cohen got a lot of those moves up their sleeves. So let's get it.
Absolutely. So make sure you subscribe to Chris's channel, and make sure, guys, if you're on X, right, I had over 66 people watching on X. Come over to the channels and subscribe to the channels as well, guys. And I'll be posting tomorrow a video of my prediction of the top 25 free agents. I have to edit it again because a few guys took the opted in and also signed contracts. So I got to fix that up a little bit, even though I had the video ready to go. Now I got to fix it again. So, but tomorrow, probably before a special stream at 5 p.m. tomorrow, I'll be posting a top 25 prediction video for the top 25 free agents based on the MLB website. So make sure you tune in for that. I know a lot of people have been asking me about it. It will be coming up tomorrow before free agency starts at 5 p.m. So with that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to Mets Hot Stove Live, episode 2. Subscribe, hit that like button, and we'll see you next time on Mets Hot Stove, guys. Have a great night. And as always, Met fans, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.
in the dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, the heart steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Grimace from the shadows, chills on my spine. Past haunts, the future shine. Come